The hospital lobby was buzzing with morning chatter when suddenly, every voice fell silent. A German shepherd staggered through the entrance, his legs trembling, his fur soaked with mud and streaks of dried blood. People gasped. A mother pulled her children close. A nurse pressed a hand over her mouth. But then, they saw what he was carrying. Across his back, barely held up by his strength, was a tiny little girl, limp, pale, and unconscious. Her head rested against his neck, her small hand dangling, her dress torn as if she'd survived something unthinkable. The dog kept walking, every step heavy but determined, refusing to stop. He didn't bark. He didn't panic. He just headed straight for the emergency doors. Like he knew exactly where to go, doctors sprinted toward him. Security scrambled. Chaos erupted. One thing was clear, this dog wasn't bringing a patient. He was delivering a miracle. And a warning. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. No one noticed him at first. A massive German shepherd stepped inside, his paws heavy against the polished floor, his fur matted with dirt and streaks of dried blood. But that wasn't what froze the entire lobby. Draped across his broad back was a tiny little girl, no more than 6 or 7, limp and dangerously pale, her dress torn and legs dangling helplessly on either side of the dog's ribs. Gasps erupted instantly. A nurse screamed. A doctor dropped his clipboard. The dog didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't look confused. Instead, he walked with purpose, determined, steady, almost urgent, his sharp eyes fixed straight ahead like he already knew exactly where help was. A triage nurse rushed forward, hands outstretched. "Oh my God, someone help her. Someone get a gurney." Her voice cracked, half in panic, half in awe. The German shepherd stopped right in front of her, lowering his front legs slightly as if inviting the staff to take the girl from him. But his ears stayed alert, watching every movement with fierce protectiveness. Doctors hurried in from every direction. "We need to move her now." But when another nurse reached for the girl's shoulder, the dog snapped his head forward, teeth bared, not to attack, but to warn. The message was crystal clear. Be careful with her. The staff froze, stunned by the animal's intelligence. And his desperation. In that moment, everyone understood this wasn't just a dog bringing a child to safety. This was a guardian fighting against time. Hero who refused to let her die. Chaos erupted the moment. The medical team managed to lift the little girl from the dog's back. The girl's head lolled to the side, her soft hair sticking to her sweat-dampened forehead, her lips faintly blue. She didn't cry. She didn't move. She barely breathed. That terrified everyone more than anything else. Dr. Hayes leaned over her, placing 2 fingers gently beneath her jaw. His face tightened instantly. Her pulses thready, faint. "Very faint," he said, trying to stay composed. "We need an IV, oxygen, and pediatric trauma support. Now move." 2 nurses sprinted to gather equipment, while another checked her pupils. "Minimal response," she whispered, eyes wide with fear. "She's crashing." As they pushed the gurney down the hall, the dog, still trembling with adrenaline, kept pace beside them, ignoring every attempt to hold him back. His paws beat rhythmically against the tile, his breathing harsh. His eyes locked onto the girl as though he feared losing sight of her for even a second. Inside Trauma Room 3. The girl's small chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath weaker than the last. Pressure's dropping. Someone shouted, "We're losing her." He rolled up the girl's sleeve and froze. Dark, deep bruising wrapped around her tiny arm, far too severe to be from a simple fall. More marks appeared across her ribs and legs as they examined her, each one raising more questions. What happened to this child? A nurse whispered, horrified. No one answered. No one could, but outside the room, The German Shepherd whined and scratched at the door. Desperate to get back to her. It was as if he already knew. Her life hung by a thread. And the truth behind her injuries was far more terrifying than anyone imagined. But none of that noise mattered to the German Shepherd. He sat pressed against the door, chest heaving, ears pinned forward, every muscle tight with tension. Whenever footsteps approached, he snarled low, warning anyone who got too close. It wasn't aggression. It was fear. A deep, instinctive fear that the little girl he had carried on his back might not come out alive. Officer Daniels arrived moments later, out of breath from rushing inside after the frantic call from dispatch. He skidded to a stop the second he saw the dog. "Rex?" he whispered, stunned. "What on earth happened to you, boy?" But Rex didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge him. His entire focus was locked on the sealed door, his body trembling with an anxious energy Daniels had never seen before. A nurse approached with cautious steps. "Sir, we need your help getting him away from the door. He's scaring the staff." Daniels shook his head slowly. If Rex is acting like this, something is very, very wrong. He knelt down beside the dog, trying to soothe him, but Rex only pushed forward harder, pressing his nose against the base of the door as if he could smell the girl's fading heartbeat from the other side. "No," a doctor murmured, stepping closer. "This isn't normal. He isn't just waiting. He's protecting her." Every time someone reached for the handle, Rex growled, planting his paws firmly as if guarding the only thing that mattered to him. Staff exchanged uneasy glances. None dared to push past him. At that moment, it became unmistakably clear. This wasn't a dog waiting for a patient. This was a guardian refusing to abandon a child he had nearly died to save. And he wasn't going anywhere until she was safe. Inside Trauma Room 3. The atmosphere had shifted from controlled urgency to outright crisis. The little girl lay motionless on the table, surrounded by bright lights and frantic hands. A nurse called out numbers, blood pressure sinking, oxygen levels dropping. "Her breathing is shallow," Dr. Hayes warned, leaning over her tiny chest. "We need to intubate, prepare the ventilator." His voice remained steady, but his eyes revealed the growing fear beneath. Pediatric emergencies always felt heavier, but this was different. The bruising, the collapse, the unknown cause, it was a puzzle with too little time to solve. Two nurses rushed to prepare the airway equipment. Another connected additional monitors, hands shaking as she worked. The girl's skin grew paler by the second, her heartbeat flickering weakly on the screen. "She's slipping," someone murmured. "We're losing her." Officer Daniels reached out again, hoping to calm the dog, but Rex lunged back at the door, refusing to be pulled away. It wasn't defiance. It was terror. Pure, burning terror that the girl he carried, bleeding, unconscious, barely breathing, might never come back. Inside, the medical team made their final push. "We're not losing her," Dr. Hayes said firmly, his voice slicing through the panic. "On my count, 3, 2, 1. Lift." Outside, Rex froze, as if he sensed it too. The faint heartbeat brought a moment of relief, but the medical team knew they weren't out of danger yet. As the girl's breathing steadied slightly under the ventilator, Dr. Hayes stepped closer with a focused, troubled expression. "Let's assess her fully," he instructed. "We need to know what caused this collapse." A nurse gently lifted the girl's arm, pulling her sleeve back farther than before. The breath hitched in her throat. "Doctor, look at this." Dark, ominous bruises covered nearly the entire length of the girl's arm, deep shades of purple and black, spreading up toward her shoulder. They weren't fresh, but they weren't old either. And they certainly weren't accidental. Dr. Hayes felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Document everything," he ordered. His voice grew tight. "This pattern, these aren't from a fall." Another nurse stepped closer, examining the girl's ribs with careful hands. More bruising emerged, wrapping around her torso like fingerprints left behind by violence. "There's swelling here," she whispered. "Possible internal bleeding." The room grew heavier. What they were seeing was far more disturbing than they expected. A third nurse pulled back the girl's torn dress, revealing small cuts across her legs, some shallow, some deeper, all inconsistent with a simple accident. A hush fell between the doctors and nurses, their eyes meeting in silent horror. This child hadn't simply been hurt. She had been harmed. Dr. Hayes straightened, jaw tight. "Prepare for a CT scan. We need to know the extent of the internal damage." Someone finally asked the question hanging thick in the air. Who did this to her? No one had an answer. Outside the room, Rex suddenly went still. He pressed his ear to the door, posture rigid, as if he sensed the shift inside. His deep, low growl rumbled through the hallway, not aggressive, but protective. Fiercely protective. Officer Daniels felt the hairs on his arms rise. "He knows," he murmured. "He knows exactly what happened to that child." Inside Trauma Room 3, the truth unfolded piece by terrifying piece, and it was becoming painfully clear. This little girl hadn't escaped danger. She had survived it. The hallway outside. Trauma Room 3 had grown crowded, nurses whispering, patients watching from a distance, security trying to keep the space clear. But through all the noise and movement, Rex remained planted in front of the door like a stone wall, his body rigid, his breathing sharp and uneven. No one dared to force him back. That was the scene Officer Grant walked into when he arrived moments later, called in by dispatch after reports of a police dog entering the hospital with an unconscious child. At first, he thought it was an exaggeration, some misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But the moment he turned the corner and saw the massive German Shepherd pressed against the trauma room door, his steps faltered. "Rex?" Grant whispered, eyes widening. Rex flicked his ears but didn't turn. His focus remained glued to the door, muscles tense like coiled wire. Grant hurried forward. "How is this possible?" "He went missing during patrol this morning. We've been searching everywhere." Officer Daniels nodded grimly. "He showed up carrying a little girl. No owner, no ID, just her." Grant stared at the dog with a mix of relief and confusion. Rex was trained, disciplined, fearless, but this behavior was unlike anything he'd ever seen. The dog wasn't just alert. He wasn't just worried. He was terrified of losing that child. A nurse stepped closer, lowering her voice. "He won't let anyone approach the room without warning. It's like he thinks she's still in danger." Grant watched Rex's trembling frame and swallowed hard. Maybe she is. Just then, 2 more officers arrived, reporting that emergency calls had come in earlier from a rural area. Sounds of a struggle. A child screaming, a dog barking violently, but the signal cut out before they could trace the location. A sickening realization washed over Grant. "Are you saying Rex was there?" Daniels asked. One officer nodded. "We think he tried to stop whoever hurt the girl." Silence fell. Inside the trauma room, machines beeped frantically. Rex pressed harder against the door, whimpering softly, desperate. Rex's pacing grew more frantic by the minute. Each time the trauma room door opened slightly, he lunged forward, only to be held back by Officer Grant's steady hand on his harness. The dog wasn't acting out. He was pleading, urging, insisting. It was as if he needed the officers to understand something he couldn't communicate with words. Finally, Grant knelt down beside him. "Rex," he whispered, voice steady yet uncertain, "show me. Show me where you found her." The moment the words left his mouth, Rex spun around, tail stiff, body vibrating with urgency. He trotted a few steps down the hall, then turned back, barking sharply once, twice, eyes fixed on Grant. "He wants us to follow," Daniels said, recognizing the deliberate pattern in the dog's behavior. This wasn't confusion. This was direction. Hospital staff parted as Rex led the officers through the lobby, past startled visitors and wide-eyed nurses, straight toward the main exit. The automatic doors slid open and the chilly air rushed in. Rex bolted forward, nose to the ground, following a trail only he could sense. Grant exchanged a glance with Daniels. "If he's tracking something, we need backup." Within minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled out behind Rex, who raced across the parking lot, weaving between cars until he reached the far corner. There, he stopped abruptly, his body lowering, tail pointing rigidly, a deep growl rumbling through his chest. Grant's breath caught. Lying in the dirt was a small, torn piece of fabric, a scrap from the girl's dress. Next to it were faint footprints. And something else. Drag marks. Daniels knelt down, examining the ground. This wasn't an accident. Grant swallowed hard. Rex is trying to take us back to where it happened. Rex pressed onward, guiding the officers out of the parking lot and across a stretch of open field. His movements became sharper, more urgent, as if every step brought him closer to something he desperately needed them to see. The patrol cars followed slowly behind, headlights sweeping across the uneven ground. Even the wind felt tense, whispering through the grass like it carried a warning. Soon, the asphalt gave way to dirt. Thin branches snapped under their boots as the officers followed Rex into a dense line of trees. The forest swallowed them quickly, the sounds of the hospital fading behind them. Rex sniffed the air, ears pinned forward, then broke into a run, weaving through the underbrush with practiced precision. "Stay close," Grant shouted, pushing past low branches. Rex skidded to a halt near a clearing. The officers froze. The ground told a story no one wanted to read. Blood. Not a lot, but enough to make Grant's stomach twist. A child-sized shoe lay partially buried under leaves, its strap torn. Nearby, small handprints smudged into the dirt showed where someone had tried to push themselves upright. And beside them, deep boot prints, far larger, circling the area like a predator stalking prey. Daniels crouched down, fingertips hovering above a crushed patch of grass. "There was a struggle here," he said quietly. "A violent one." Rex pawed at the earth frantically, whining as he lowered his nose to the bloodied soil. His entire body trembled not with fear, but with memory. He had been here. He had fought here. Grant swallowed hard. "She didn't wander into those woods," he murmured. "She was dragged." The weight of the truth settled over the clearing like a shadow, and Rex wasn't leading them. Randomly, he was retracing the path of a nightmare. Rex's nose lifted suddenly, catching a scent carried by the cold forest breeze. His ears shot up, and without warning, he bolted deeper into the woods. "Rex, slow down!" Grant shouted, but the dog didn't hesitate. His strides lengthened, purposeful and fierce. Guided by instinct and memory, the officers followed, branches slapping against their uniforms as they forced their way through thick brush. The forest darkened the farther they went, sunlight struggling to filter through the canopy. Then, just as Grant began to wonder if Rex was chasing shadows, the trees parted. A small, weathered cabin sat barely visible between the tangled pines, its wooden walls warped. Windows cracked, roof sagging as if it hadn't been touched in years. Except someone had touched it recently. The padlock on the door was broken, hanging loosely by one twisted hinge. Rex growled low, hackles rising as he approached the steps. Daniels inspected the ground. "Fresh footprints," he murmured. "Multiple pairs. One set small, like a child's." Grant's stomach tightened. This must be where he found her. Carefully, weapons drawn, the officers pushed open the creaking door. A stale, suffocating odor seeped out: damp wood, rotting fabric, and something metallic. The air inside felt wrong. Flashlights swept across the cabin. A torn blanket lay on the floor. A rope, an overturned chair, and scattered across the table crumbs of food, a cracked mug. And a small pink hair clip. The girls, Daniels whispered. Rex barked sharply. Repeatedly, as if urging them to look further. Grant's flashlight stopped at the far corner. Deep gouges were carved into the wooden floor scratch marks. Frantic, desperate. She tried to escape, Grant said. Voice low. A chilling silence filled the cabin. Whoever brought her here didn't just hurt her. They meant to keep her. Grant stood frozen in the dim cabin. The beam of his flashlight trembling as it swept across the scratched floorboards. If she was kept here, he whispered, his voice tight, then Rex must have gotten to her before it was too late. Daniels nodded. But Rex's behavior said more than either of them could. The dog paced the room restlessly. Nose pressed to the ground, moving in a perfect loop. Retracing steps burned into his memory. Every few seconds, he stopped at the same spot near the doorway, lowered his head, and let out a deep, guttural growl. Grant knelt beside him. "Show me, boy," he murmured. Rex suddenly lunged toward the doorframe, teeth bared, claws scraping the wood as he barked violently. The sound shook the small cabin, echoing off the rotting walls. Daniels took a step back. "He's reenacting something," he said. "Something that happened here." The truth unfolded in their minds like a flashback. The girl, terrified, weakened, must have attempted to crawl toward the exit. The captor likely realized it and came after her. And Rex, somewhere in the forest, had heard her scream. Grant swallowed hard. Rex must have charged through the broken door, confronting the attacker head-on. A German shepherd, trained and loyal, against a man with violence in his hands. The struggle had been brutal. Overturned furniture, blood droplets near the corner, claw marks on the door where Rex had launched himself forward. Daniels traced his fingers over the broken table leg. "He fought him," he said quietly. "He actually fought the man off. Just long enough to get her out." Rex stopped pacing and looked up at them, chest rising and falling with the weight of memory. The officers exchanged a stunned, emotional glance. "He didn't just protect her," Grant whispered. "He saved her life with his own." Rex, still streaked with dirt and dried blood, rushed ahead of them, claws clicking sharply against the polished floor. He didn't wait for permission or command. He pushed past startled staff, stopping once more at the door of Trauma Room 3. He pressed his nose hard against the bottom seam, whining with desperate urgency. His tail curled inward, his body trembling. Grant approached a nurse standing nearby. "How is she? What's happening now?" The nurse exhaled shakily. "She's stable. For the moment. But the internal injuries are worse than we thought. They're preparing her for emergency surgery." Daniel stepped forward. "Can we speak to Dr. Hayes?" Before the nurse could answer, the trauma room door swung open. Dr. Hayes emerged wearing a pale blue surgical cap, streaks of sweat across his brow. His eyes were tired, but sharp with focus. "She's holding on," he said, voice steady but strained. "But the trauma to her abdomen is severe. There's internal bleeding, and we still don't know how long she was without proper circulation. If we don't operate now, she won't make it." Rex let out a soft, trembling cry. The doctor glanced down at him, something like awe flickering in his tired eyes. "That dog. He's been glued to this door since she arrived. It's like he understands." Grant nodded. "He does." A stretcher appeared behind Dr. Hayes. The little girl lay atop it, tiny and fragile under the tangle of tubes and monitors. Her skin was pale, her eyelashes still. Her small hand twitched once before going still again. Rex barked a single, sharp, heartbroken sound. Dr. Hayes placed a hand gently on the stretcher railing. "We're taking her to the OR. If she has any chance at survival, it's now." As they wheeled her toward surgery, Rex followed at their heels, refusing to fall behind. Inside, bright white lights illuminated the room. The medical team moved with razor-sharp precision. Dr. Hayes stood at the head of the table, his voice steady but low, directing the team. "Scalpel, suction. Keep an eye on her pressure. If it drops further, we'll lose her." The girl's vital signs fluttered weakly on the monitor. Her pulse was unstable, dipping dangerously low before climbing again. Her small chest rose and fell with mechanical assistance, each breath a fragile battle. "Bleeding source found," a surgeon announced. Tears along the lower abdomen. "It's bad." "Repairing now," Dr. Hayes responded, his gloved hands working quickly. Sweat gathered at his temples. Meanwhile, outside, Officer Grant and Daniel stood beside Rex, their eyes shifting between the dog and the glowing surgery light. Time dragged painfully. Every few seconds, Rex whined softly, his nose pressed against the glass, as if he could feel her slipping. Inside the OR, the tension mounted. "She's crashing," a nurse shouted. Alarms blared, piercing the sterile atmosphere. The heart monitor dipped dangerously low, flatlining for a split second. "Stay with me, sweetheart," Dr. Hayes murmured. "Charge it now." The defibrillator paddles pressed to her chest. "1. Clear." Her small body jolted. The line jumped, then dipped. Again. "Clear." Another jolt. Another desperate moment of waiting. Then. A blip. A second blip. A rising rhythm. "She's back," the nurse breathed in relief. "Pulse is returning." Dr. Hayes exhaled deeply. "Stabilize her. Finish the repair. She's fighting." Outside the glass, Rex suddenly stopped pacing. He lifted his head, ears forward, as if sensing the shift. His tail just barely gave a faint wag. Inside the OR, the crisis settled. The danger wasn't gone. Hours after the surgery, the hospital room was quiet, soft beeping from monitors, gentle hum from the hallway lights, a stillness that felt almost sacred. The little girl lay tucked beneath warm blankets, her breathing slow and steady for the first time since she arrived. Beside her bed, Rex rested on the floor, his head on his paws, eyes half open but alert. He hadn't moved since they brought her in. Officer Grant and Daniel stood near the doorway, speaking softly with a nurse when it happened. A tiny sound, barely more than a whisper. Rex's ears shot up. The girl's fingers switched, curling slightly against the blanket. Her eyes fluttered, opening just enough for the dim room to come into focus. She blinked weakly, confusion crossing her small face, then fear. Her breathing quickened. Rex stood instantly. The girl's gaze drifted until it landed on him. Her lips trembled. Tears filled her eyes. "Doggy," she whispered. Grant stepped forward gently. "You're safe. You're in the hospital. No one is going to hurt you." The girl shook her head slowly, tiny shoulders trembling. He tried to take me. He hurt me." Her voice cracked, barely audible. "But the dog, he saved me." Daniels crouched beside her bed. "Can you tell us what happened?" She swallowed, gathering the strength to speak. "I screamed. And he came. The bad man hit him, but he didn't stop. He pulled me away. He didn't let go." Rex let out a soft emotional whine, placing his paw gently against the side of the bed. The girl's eyes filled completely. "He carried me. All the way." Grant felt his throat tighten. In that fragile moment, the truth settled over the room, a truth spoken by the only witness who truly knew. Rex hadn't just rescued her, he had refused to let her die. The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the hospital blinds, painting warm lines across the room. The little girl sat propped up by pillows, her small hands wrapped around a cup of warm broth a nurse had helped her sip. She was still weak, still pale, but her eyes held a spark that hadn't been there before, a quiet strength returning. Piece by fragile piece, Rex waited just outside the door, tail sweeping slowly across the floor. He hadn't left the doorway all night. Nurses tried coaxing him away with water, treats, even gentle nudges, but nothing worked. He refused to budge. He would stay until she was safe. Finally, a nurse approached with a gentle smile. "Sweetheart," she said to the girl, "someone is waiting to see you." The girl's eyes widened instantly. "Rex?" The nurse nodded and opened the door. Rex stepped inside slowly at first, as if worried he might disturb her. His head lowered, ears soft, his massive body moving with surprising gentleness. The girl's breath caught in her throat. Tears welled in her eyes before she could speak. "Come here, boy." That was all he needed. Rex hurried forward, resting his head at the edge of her bed with a deep, relieved whine. The girl placed her small hands on his fur, fingers trembling. She leaned forward, burying her face between his ears. "You came back," she whispered. "You didn't leave me." Rex nudged her softly, tail wagging a slow, emotional rhythm. Officer Grant stood in the doorway, watching with a tightness in his chest. Daniels beside him wiped at his eyes. "She needed him," Grant murmured. "No," Daniels replied. They needed each other. In that room, in that fragile reunion, the trauma and fear faded quietly into hope, and the bond between them unbreakable. Officer Grant stood proudly beside Rex, who sat tall and alert, his fur brushed, his badge collar gleaming under the lights. But even with the attention, Rex's eyes kept drifting toward the hallway, waiting for one person. The double doors opened. The little girl appeared, wrapped in a soft blanket, held gently in her mother's arms. Though still recovering, her face lit up the moment she saw Rex. Her mother whispered, "Do you want to go to him?" The child nodded weakly. A wheelchair was brought forward, and her mother carefully set her down. As soon as she was positioned, Rex broke his disciplined posture and hurried toward her, tail wagging with a joy that shook his whole body. The girl reached out her arms. "Rex!" she cried softly. He rested his head in her lap, eyes closing with pure relief. A warm hush filled the room. Sheriff Wallace stepped to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice steady with emotion, "we are gathered to honor an extraordinary act of bravery. This K-9 didn't just perform his duty, he risked his life, fought against danger, and carried a child miles to safety. He showed courage beyond training, and love beyond instinct." Grant placed a medal gently around Rex's neck. The crowd erupted into applause. The little girl leaned forward and kissed the top of Rex's head. "He's my hero," she whispered. Tears glistened in her mother's eyes. "He saved my baby." Grant swallowed hard as he looked at the pair, dog and child, two survivors, forever bound by one night of terror and one miracle of courage. Rex licked the girl's hand gently, as if promising he would always protect her. And in that moment, everyone watching understood.